Today, I got a Zotac RTX 5060 on the bench with a simple customer complaint that usually isn't simple at all. The fans spin, but there's no display from the GPU. And what makes this one interesting is that it's a brand new card. Yet, it feels like a card that's been abused for years. So let's find out what's actually going on, and I'll show you the exact moment the real fault reveals itself. This RTX 5060 is a dual fan model, and the first thing you notice when you hold it is how lightweight it is. The shroud is made of tough plastic, but the backplate is metal, and honestly, it looks really nice. Zotac did a good job with the aesthetics here, but looks don't help when there's no display. So let's get straight to the diagnosis. I start the repair the same way I do most no display cards. I install the GPU on my test bench, but I boot the system using the internal display because the card itself isn't giving any output. I boot into my memory testing environment using Tiny Linux. Before running any test, I always confirm one thing. Is the GPU even being detected on the PCIe bus? So I run the command lspci, and right away I can see the GPU in the list of PCIe devices. It shows up as a VGA compatible controller, and I can see the audio device entry as well, which is exactly what I want to see. That means the GPU is alive enough to work properly. So now it's time to stop guessing and start testing. Next, I switch to the 5060 folder. To check the faulty memory, I run the command that's displayed on the screen. This GPU has only 2 memory channels and 4 banks. That translates to 4 memory modules on the board. And the result is very clear. Memory channel A, bank 1 is faulty. So A1 is a problem area. Now here's the part that matters. This is a new GPU, and it's not normal for a memory module to just go bad so early in its life. Yes, this can happen, but with the card this new, when mods flags one bank like this, I immediately suspect there's something else going on, like solder joint issues, mechanical damage, or something related to how the chip is attached to the board. So now I dismantle the GPU. And something catches my eye immediately. This is the first time I've seen a seal on a Zotac GPU. They didn't do this on either of the previous cards. It's a small detail, but it tells you manufacturers are changing how they handle warranty and temper detection on newer models. Once I get deeper into the teardown, we can finally see what hardware we are dealing with. This GPU uses Samsung GDDR7 memory modules. These are 8 GB, rated at 28 Gbps. And I'm putting the memory model number on the screen so you can see it clearly. And now, look closely around the GPU core and the memory modules. This board has an underfill around the GPU core and also around the memory modules. Underfill is basically a glue-like material that's applied to improve mechanical stability. In theory, it helps hold the chip in place and reduce stress, but in practice, it also adds a new challenge when you actually need to remove the memory module. I'm going to be honest, this underfill was extremely sticky. I don't know how effective it truly is at holding the chip in place long term. But I can tell you one thing for sure. It makes removal a lot harder. And in this repair, I feel like I spend more time removing underfill than doing the actual repair. To start removing it, I use hot air to soften the underfill and peel it away. And this one fought me the entire time. It was sticky, stubborn, and it just didn't want to release cleanly. At this point, I bring in a piece of equipment you probably never seen in my older videos. My old custom-made preheater. This started life as a Kodak preheater, but I modified it completely. I removed the original control circuit and added an external controller because the original unit used to overshoot the temperature by 20 to 25 degrees. And that's a disaster, especially when you're dealing with modern memory chips that are sensitive to temperature. So now I only use the IR ceramic heater unit, and it's connected to a controller that I mounted externally inside a computer power supply casing. This used to be my full rework station back in the early days. Now it's mainly a dedicated preheater. When you're removing or installing modern memory chips, bottom heat matters a lot. If you don't get enough bottom heat, you end up blasting too much hot air from the top for too long, and that stresses the chips. So I like to get the bottom heat above 200 degrees Celsius for these newer memory modules. On this preheater, I set the bottom heat to 240 degrees Celsius. That doesn't mean the top of the board is 240 degrees Celsius, but it helps bring everything up uniformly. And it allows quicker chip removal so you don't end up overheating or stressing the memory modules. I add flux around the memory module. The link to the flux I use will be in the video description. I wait for the preheater to reach the set temperature of 240 degrees Celsius. And before I apply hot air, I protect the surrounding components, especially electrolytic capacitors, by covering them with aluminum tape. This helps reduce the risk of accidental damage. Now I go in with the hot air at 420 degrees Celsius and 60% airflow. And this is important. The actual temperature the chip experiences is controlled by the distance from the nozzle to the chip. So I'm always adjusting distance and movement to control how aggressive the heat is. While heating, I tap the memory chip regularly to check whether the solder has melted. And once I see movement while tapping, that's my confirmation that the solder is liquid. At that moment, I lift the memory module. With the chip removed, I begin cleaning and preparing the board. I first remove the excess unleaded solder. Then I tin the area with leaded solder to bring down the melting temperature. After that, I use a copper braid to wick the solder off the pads on the board. Then I clean the burnt flux off the board using a cotton pad. And now, this is the moment the real fault shows itself. Once the board is clean, I can see a broken pad on the top right side of the memory slot. One of the pad is ripped off. This is not a memory chip problem. This is a connection problem, and specifically, this pad is a data line connecting the memory module to the GPU core. So the A1 memory error wasn't necessarily because the memory module is defective. It's because one of the signals needed for the memory bank to communicate correctly is physically missing. Now, consider this. This GPU is lightweight, and I'm honestly wondering what could have caused the pad to get ripped in this corner. It could be mechanical stress, flex, manufacturing strain, or something during handling. And the underfill that's applied also didn't save it. Whatever the root cause, the outcome is clear. The pad is gone and it needs a proper pad repair. So I clean the area thoroughly. I pour some isopropyl alcohol on the board and brush the area to clean it. Now the traces are clearly visible and I can plan the repair. To start, I scrape off the solder mask covering the traces using a sharp knife. I expose the copper trace I need, but I also protect the surrounding exposed copper that is not part of the trace by covering it with UV mask. Once that mask is hardened, it's time to rebuild the missing pad. I pour a tiny amount of UV mask onto the board so I can control exactly how much mask I'm applying to the area. And then I begin filling the hole bit by bit. I don't dump a large blob all at once. I build it gradually because control matters here. Once the hole is filled up to the correct level, I carefully place the new pad onto the UV mask. And this is where my new tool made my life easier. I'm using a new tweezer I bought from AliExpress. It made it much easier to pick and place fine pads accurately. I'll place a link for that in the video description. I'll also link the pads I use. They are nice and thick, which makes them easier to work with. Once the pad is placed, I use the UV lamp to harden the mask so the pad is secured in place. Next, I apply flux and attempt to secure the pad, but it comes off. Maybe it wasn't fully secured, or maybe the first bond wasn't strong enough. Either way, I don't take chances. I repeat the process and add some mask around the pad to make absolutely sure it's fully secure. This time, it holds properly. Now, I solder the tail of the pad to the trace, and it's secured. I then break off the excess tail and I clean off the flux using isopropyl alcohol and a brush. And before I cover anything up, I test the joint to make sure it's making a proper connection. Once I'm satisfied, I cover the joint with UV mask to secure it permanently, and I hardened it using the UV lamp. At this point, the board is ready to accept the memory module again. But the memory module has to be reballed first. So I move to the memory chip. I apply flux, remove the excess solder from the module, then tin it with leaded solder and wick it clean using a copper braid. Then I clean the memory module with isopropyl alcohol and a soft cloth. Now it goes into the reballing jig. I align it properly, apply a thin layer of flux, place the stencil for GDDR7 and drop 0.45mm leaded solder balls. Some balls stick to the stencil, which is normal. So I place the memory module on the mat and manually place the missing balls onto the pads. Then, using hot air at 300 degrees Celsius, I solder the balls in place. Once the balls are seated properly, I pour isopropyl alcohol on the module and brush off the used flux. Now the memory module is ready to be installed back onto the board. Back to the board now. I place the board on the preheater, I apply flux on the board, and then to the memory module. I carefully place and align the memory module in its slot. This time I wait for the preheater to reach 240 degrees Celsius, and once it reaches that temperature, I go in with the hot air at 420 degrees Celsius and 60% airflow and solder the memory module in place. Once the chip is seated, I don't rush anything. I let the board cool down naturally to room temperature. Now it's time for the moment of truth. Once cooled, I place the board back on the bench and boot again into my memory testing USB. I move to the 5060 directory and run the mods command again. And it gives me a fail message. Now that might sound bad, but in this case, it's actually a good sign. Because earlier we had a memory bank failure, now we're in a different state. And it strongly indicates the original memory fault condition is no longer present the way it was. And at this point, I want a real world confirmation, not just a command result. So I reboot the test bench and switch the display output to the GPU itself to check if it can get an image. And this time, I have a display from the GPU. That is the confirmation we wanted. Now, I clean the board properly. I remove all flux residue using isopropyl alcohol and a brush. And once everything is clean, it's time to rebuild the card. I assemble the GPU back together starting with the I/O bracket. Then I apply fresh thermal paste and spread it evenly across the surface. Then I install the backplate, then the cooler, and then I make sure all screws are in place and tightened correctly. Now it's time for full validation in Windows. I install the GPU back on the bench and this time I boot into Windows. I wait for the drivers to install. Once the drivers are in, I start my test sequence. First, I run FurMark, mainly to check that the temperature increase is linear and stable. No sudden spikes, no weird throttling behavior, no immediate crashes. Next, I run Superposition and the score is good. Then I run 3D Mark Nomad and the score is good again. And finally, I run 3D Mark Speedway and the score is within spec, confirming the repair is stable under load and the GPU is behaving as it should. So that's the repair. A no-display RTX 5060 diagnosed with a memory error on channel A bank 1, but the real fault turned out to be a ripped pad on a data line under the memory module. After pad repair, reball, reinstall, and a full validation, the GPU is back to life and passing stress tests. If you need a repair on your GPU, head over onto my website gpusolutions.net and you can easily book your repair there. You'll receive a ticket number after submission. Most of the emails are automated. When I update the findings on your GPU, you'll receive an email with the case notes. This is all automated. And if you run a repair business and you use WordPress, I use a plugin called Repair Buddy plugin. And it's perfect for any repair business. It helps me stay focused on repairs and handles the task-related work from the back end. As a technician, it gives a clear view of the tickets and helps you organize and time-bound your work. I'll leave a link in the video description. You can also use the code GPU Solutions to get 20% off on your purchase of this plugin. If you think I should make a dedicated video about how I use it, leave a comment on this video and tell me. Also, after I was back from my vacations, I've relocated to a bigger and a better place. It took me a while to set things up and make sure I was back on track with repairs. If you liked the video, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. Thank you for watching this far and supporting the channel. Bye for now. Cheers.